Howdy folks, my name is Bucket Fridge. I hope you're all doing very well today. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel. In today's video, we're going to go over the newly adjusted Paladin tree, specifically Prot Paladin. So after a smidge of housekeeping, we'll jump right into the talent trees and the changes, so let's get into it. Just a bit of housekeeping and then we'll hop into things. The first thing is, if you are interested in all things tanking, this is definitely the channel for you. We'll be going over all the different tanks and we'll be having a weekly segment. We will discuss all the different tank changes, and after this video there will be a Guardian Druid video release. So again, if you're interested in all things tanking, make sure to subscribe. And the second piece of housekeeping is, again, this is just my personal opinion on the matter. There are plenty of content creators out there with wonderful and amazing opinions, and you should find as many content creators as you can and listen to all the information that you can so you can make the decision that's best for you, because only you know what is best for you when it comes to playing World of Warcraft. So with the housekeeping out of the way, let's hop into the talent trees. All right, so the big change that I wanted to talk about first with Prot Pally, which is actually pretty cool, is the mastery got reworked a little bit. So it says, while inside your consecrate, your damage taken is reduced by 3% and you have a chance equal to your block chance to reduce damage taken from harmful periodic effects. Also increases your attack power by 8%. So it really just means that they added your block, you have a chance equal to your block chance to reduce damage taken from harmful periodic effects, which is very nice, as well as there is a bunch of talents inside the talent tree that obviously increase your block chance. And so if there is a really harmful dot, say like the jailer dot that happens, or another tank mechanic that really nukes you, this has a chance to reduce the damage taken from those things, which is pretty cool, making them a little bit more tanky. Most of the other things are just a few different wordings, a few buffs here and there. Most notably, the gift of the Golden Valkyr got bumped up to 30% from 20%. And then the Inspiring Vanguard got to increase your strength by 2% for 8 seconds. Percent strength scaling is usually better than a flat number or a flat amount of strength. So 2% will obviously scale. The more strength you have, the better that talent gets. So with those things out of the way, let's go down the trees. We'll go down the basic tree first, and then we'll go down the protection tree. But just overall, even after some changes, there's a little bit of changes obviously in the protection tree, but I still think that the basic paladin tree needs a little bit of love, and I think they could keep iterating on the protection tree. I think Prot Pally is unfortunately probably in the worst position of all the tanks, and that is not to say that Prot Paladin is bad by any means. I don't think any of the tanks are bad, but I think Prot Paladin is probably in need of the most love, especially when it comes to their tree. Prot Paladin has always been a very fun and enjoyable tank to play, so I hope they continue to iterate on it and continue to make positive changes like these ones. But like I said, I think Prot Pally still needs a little bit of love. They're really not getting anything terribly exciting that's new other than Sentinel and Eye of Tyr, and we'll get into that when we get down into the protection tree. But for the most part, I don't think Prot Paladin is bad. It just could use a little bit of love. So with that being said, let's hop into the regular tree first, and then we'll go down the protection tree. Okay, so we're going to go down the regular tree. So we start with Lay on Hands, which isn't terrible. We have the options to spec into Blessing of Freedom and Hammer of Wrath. I think Hammer of Wrath is definitely one we want to spec into regardless of spec. Maybe not Holy, but Holy has always been a spec that also does a lot of damage for a healer, so this is a very good button for almost every spec of Paladin. Whereas Blessing of Freedom, you don't always need it. When it's good, obviously it's very good, but when it is not needed, it's obviously doesn't do anything. So I think we're going to leave that for now, assuming that we're not in a situation where we need to take this. And then with the Aura of Vengeance and giving us Retribution Aura and Crusader Aura, I think if we're the only Paladin in the group, we'll always have Devotion Aura on just because of how powerful that is. So I don't know that if we don't have another Paladin that you take this, but if you do have another Paladin, then I think this would be worth taking. But we'll operate under the assumption that we are the only Paladin in the raid for now. So let's take our pony, and unfortunately, we still have the two abilities here with Pony. They're not just kind of baked into one talent or one choice node. I'd really like to see them do something with this. Seal of the Templar is underwhelming, to say the least. While they're not necessarily bad talents, I feel like they're just kind of space fillers. So instead, for now, we'll take the Fist of Justice and we'll take our Greater Judgment. Greater Judgment obviously is very powerful for our Judgment. And then, since we need to get down into the Holy Aegis, I think what we'll do is we'll obviously take Cavalier. 2 pony charges is very good. And let's say we'll take some Blinding Light. You could also take Cleanse Toxins if you needed it for a fight with those debuffs, but if you did not need it, you could take something like the Seasoned Warhorse and give us a little bit extra duration on our pony. So now we get into the middle part of the tree. I think the middle part of the tree for Paladin is probably the best part of the tree, just because there is some actual options that you get, whereas the top of the tree and the bottom of the tree, they almost kind of fill themselves out, which isn't terribly exciting. There are good things in this middle part of the tree, but again, the top and the bottom have a little bit to be desired. So we have to take our kick to be able to get to Seal of Reprisal. Obviously, Seal of Reprisal is pretty tremendous. We'll take obviously our Avenging Wrath as well, and we'll take our Holy Aegis for some extra armor and reduced or increased crit chance as well. And we'll take our Judgment of Light. That is obviously a talent we have now. Always has been really successful, just a little bit more group utility. And we'll take our After Image. That way we can get some more healing on our allies if we need. And then we have our Bop, and we definitely want to take Unbreakable Spirit, another one of the talents we already have, so it's good to see back, leaving us with 2 points before we get down to the bottom. So we have a few options. We could take, say, Incandescence or Touch of Light, both I think which are fairly reasonable, and they kind of do something very similar, just kind of a little bit of extra damage. I don't know that either one is a tremendous amount of damage, but let's go with Incandescence for now, but Touch of Light also seems to be fine. And then the last point really just depends on what we need. If we need a little bit of extra utility for the raid, we could take the Blessing of Sacrifice, or we could take Blessing of Spell Warding or Improved Bop. Either one of those are very decent. So for now, we'll just operate under the assumption that we just say we need Blessing of Spell Warding. But again, you could take either one of these and just be fine, or you could take the sack if you needed, or if you wanted maybe a little bit of extra healing while you stand in there, you and your allies heal, so that's also a decent one. Why don't we just take a little bit of extra healing? So again, while Aspiration of Divinity is pretty good, Of Dusk and Dawn is a legendary that we have now on live, and it's always just kind of been neglected. It's not too difficult necessarily to reach 5 holy power and then spend the 5 holy power, but it is a very specific requirement to be able to get a damage reduction or do more damage and increased healing. I don't know that it is very powerful. I think that it might be something that we can test and try out, but as it stands and live currently, it has just been kind of a legendary that's been avoided, as there have just been more powerful ones. But I think for now we can just kind of go with the old reliables. We'll take the Obduracy, and we'll take our Hologram for some extra consecrate damage. We'll take our Seal of the Crusader, and then we'll take our Mad Paragon, or it's called Zealot's Paragon now, excuse me. And so this is another legendary that we have now, which is very good. We'll take our Divine Purpose. I think Divine Purpose usually just nets you more utility than Holy Avenger. 3-minute cooldown on Holy Avenger is kind of rough, but I think Holy Avenger isn't bad, but it used to be a 2-minute cooldown. I believe that was in BFA, so maybe seeing that would be better again, but Divine Purpose seems to just have more utility than Holy Avenger does, but that's okay. And then we'll take the Haste. Haste is one of our best stats, obviously, and then we will choose the Sanctified Wrath, leaving us with 2 points. And so, for example, you could back into Aspiration of Divinity to get you some extra primary stat, or using your Crusader Strike. Obviously, our Crusader Strike will turn into either Hammer of the Righteous or Blessed Hammer. So using those will give you more primary stat, and multiple applications may overlap. So if you wanted more primary stat, which is obviously very, very good, it will increase your damage and make you a little bit more survivable. Or we could take the extra mastery. During Avenging Wrath, your mastery is increased by 4% up to 8%. So either one of these I think are a fine talent to choose. I'm not sure which one will net you more damage, as this is only during Avenging Wrath that you'll get the 8% increased mastery. But the primary set is also very good, so I don't think that you could go wrong with either one of these. Like I said, I'm not sure which one nets more overall damage or more overall utility, but I'm inclined to think with the new extra mastery that this might be a smidge better than just getting a little bit more main stat, because it's only 1% per use, and it only is for 6 seconds, so you probably get 1 or 2 charges while you're waiting for these things to come off of cooldown, or if you're waiting for the holy power. So you could get a few stacks going, but I don't know that it's going to be a tremendous amount of damage. So for now, I think we'll just go with Old Reliable and take some extra mastery while we are in Avenging Wrath or Sentinel. So like I said, there are some utility that you can bring in the tree that if you need, which is nice, but the tree kind of feels itself out for each one of the specs. And I don't know that specking down into the Seal of Order and into the Of Dusk and Dawn is really worth it for protection specifically. It could be worth it for other specs, but I don't know that it's really worth it for prot. It might be something to try out, but my inclination is that if it hasn't been good so far, that I doubt bringing it back will be in a similar situation, because we're getting a lot of the tools that we have now on live anyways, with our Divine Toll, our Champions, our Bulwark of the Righteous Fury. And so I don't know that it's very applicable, but only time will tell. So that's the general tree for Paladin. So why don't we hop into the Spec Tree and touch on some of the changes there. Okay, we're going down the Protection Tree. These ones up here obviously are non-negotiables. I think in a raid setting, Blessed Hammer is a little better than Hammer of the Righteous, but in a Mythic Plus setting, Hammer of the Righteous, I believe, edges out Blessed Hammer. So it just would depend on what kind of content you are doing. So for now, we'll say that we are doing a single target raid fight, and then we will change our talents around to fit what would be better for an M+. So since we are doing a Mythic boss, we'll take some Blessed Hammer, and we'll take our Readout. Readout is very good. Shield of the Righteous increases your strength and stamina by 2% up for 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Stamina and strength obviously are very powerful for us. Very, very good. And then we'll take our Grand Crusader. Obviously, Grand Crusader is very, very powerful. We'll take our Holy Shield, as that is a talent we have now. It's our ability to block spells, which is very nice. And we'll take our Shining Light so we can get down into Consecration in Flame, or Consecrate lasts 2 seconds longer, and its damage is increased by 20%. We got an extra 10% damage increase over here, so our Consecrate is going to be pretty buff. And then for our last point to get down, or 2 points to get down to the bottom, we'll obviously take our Ardent Defender, a very powerful ability. And then I think taking the Consecrated Ground is probably better than taking the improved Lay on Hands. 10% reduced cooldown on Lay of Hands, which is, I think it's a 8-minute cooldown now. So that's about maybe a little more than a minute off of it, but I don't know that that's better than Consecrate. So if you weren't in this, for example, in an M+ is stronger than it is in a raid setting, but if you needed the improved Lay on Hands, I suppose you could take that for a raided environment, but either one seems to be applicable for certain scenarios. And then we will take I think we'll take our Sanctuary, because taking less damage while inside Consecrate by an additional 5% is very, very powerful. I think that's more powerful than getting extra shield or extra chance to block spells, because that's actually just a 10% increase. That doesn't mean we're guaranteed to block it, where this is just a flat damage decrease, which I think is a little more powerful. And since we are going to be speccing into Divine Toll, spoiler alert, I think that Bulwark of Order is very powerful, giving us a shield for as much damage as it dealt, which is very nice. And then we'll get down into Sentinel. I really think Sentinel is probably the coolest ability that Paladin is getting inside of Dragonflight. It's very awesome that Paladin is finally being able to get a very powerful defensive. Not that Guardians of the Ancient Kings or Bubbleton or those things aren't powerful defensives, but it adds a little bit more survivability and a little bit more tankiness. I really like Sentinel, and I think it's quite a cool iteration of innovation for them, so to speak, to try something different, to try to make Paladin a bit more of the defensive tank. As you'll know from playing Paladin, Paladin has always been one of the higher damage tanks, maybe a little less tanky than some of the other specs, just because of the amount of utility that Paladin brings. It's always been a trade-off. You're a little more squishy. That's not meaning you're a squishy tank in general, but just take a little bit more damage than some of the other more defensive tanks, as Paladin's utility has always been much, much better than most tanks' utility. So with that being said, let's get into the rest of the ones. But again, Sentinel is really, really cool. I love the defensiveness of it. I think it's really, really fun. And I think in scenarios where you're Mythic progging, I think this will be very strong. And then later in the expansion, when you don't need the extra defense, you can switch that to Avenging Wrath Might. But for now, I think we'll take Sentinel. I really am a fan. It's really, really cool. We'll take our Relentless Inquisitor. Haste is always very good. Haste is one of our, if not our best stat. So we definitely want a little bit more haste. We definitely want our Guardian of Ancient Kings. And we'll take our Resolute Defender. Each 3 holy power you spend reduces the cooldown of Ardent Defender and Divine Shield by 1 second. Ardent Defender is obviously a very powerful cooldown, and if you'll know from live, we have this as well. You can get Ardent Defender down to like 45 seconds, even a minute sometimes, so it's very, very powerful. Then we have 5 points left before we get down into the bottom part of the tree. So we'll take our Consecrates and Flames, additional 20% damage like we talked about. And over here we have a new one with the Strength and Adversity. For each target hit by Avenger Shield, gain 2% parry for 5 seconds, or 15 seconds, excuse me. I don't know if this is necessarily better than Crusader's Resolve. Enemies hit by Avenger's Shield deal 2% reduced damage up to, for 10 seconds. Multiple applications may have applied to a maximum of 3. So just being able to hit multiple targets with your shield of your Avenger's Shield and being able to have just a flat damage reduction, I think is going to be better than increased parry chance. I think flat damage reduction is just better than a chance to do something. So I think for now we'll take our Crusader's Resolve, especially because we'll be taking Divine Toll like we mentioned. We'll take our 2 points in Strength and Conviction, and we'll take our last point in 2 charges of Judgment. I think that's very, very powerful. And now Grand Crusader grants a charge of Judgment. So whenever a Grand Crusader procs, we will get more Judgment. So that is very, very good. Obviously, Judgment is very important to our rotation, putting us down into the bottom part of the tree. So for now, because we are using a single target environment, what we'll do is we will take Focused Enmity. That increases the damage done by up to 200%, but it only strikes one target. Obviously, if we're only fighting a boss, then we only need to be hitting one target. And then we'll take our Eye of Tyr. Eye of Tyr is an ability from Legion, if you'll remember. Very, very powerful. A lot of fun to use as well. A 25% damage reduction is incredibly powerful, and it deals a decent amount of damage as well. It's really cool to see this ability back. It was really fun to play with. It has a really cool animation in game, so it's really cool to see Eye of Tyr back again. I really had loved that spell in Legion. And then since we are in a single target raid environment, we'll take our Righteous Protector so we can get down into Divine Toll and then get down into Divine Resonance. That's the legendary that we have now for Kyrian. So this is obviously very, very powerful. The Quickened Invocation reduces the cooldown of Seraphim by 5 seconds and Divine Toll by 15 seconds. I don't know if that's necessarily better than being able to cast more of your Avenger Shields from the Divine Resonance, especially since we have a bunch of different abilities allowing us to be able to cast that more often or have bonus effects from our shield. So I think the Divine Resonance is probably a smidge better, leaving us with 4 points to play around with at the bottom of the tree. So these last 4 points are kind of depending on what you need. I think we can put 2 of them in the Marcus's Fervor. Your Avenger Shield deals 30% more damage to its primary target. Again, since we're only hitting one target with it, this is an additional 30%. So your Avenger Shield is now dealing 230% damage to one target, which is quite a bit of damage, giving us quite a big absorb, which is really nice. So now we have 2 points left, and I believe obviously we need to use these for something more defensive. So we have a few different options. So you could go down the route of just giving face armor and allowing yourself to have just 10% more armor whenever using Shield of the Righteous. Obviously, Shield of the Righteous is something that they're trying to get us to have a 100% uptime on. So just 10% more armor on a flat amount of armor is pretty decent, as long as it's obviously physical damage. We can obviously block spells, but our armor is not going to be negating the damage of spells per se. It's just our physical damage. So 10% armor is 10% armor. It's not bad at all. We also have the option to take Bubble Taunt if we need. If we're getting absolutely trucked by a boss or there's some part that needs immunity, you can still take your bubble and still have a taunt, which is very nice if you felt like you needed that. Or we could spec our 2 points into Tyr's Enforcer, making our shield, or excuse me, our Avenger Shield do more damage, therefore giving us a bigger absorb. That is an option. I don't know what's going to net more survivability per se between Tyr's Enforcer or the extra armor. That's a hard one to pick. And if you just wanted a little bit more offense, you could take the Inspiring Vanguard and get a little bit more damage as your strength will increase, which is very, very nice. You could take the Ardent Defender, reduces an additional 10% damage. So you have a few options. These last couple points, I think, are kind of there to play around with and see what we can add. You could also take Gifts of the Golden Valkyrie, like we talked about. And when you drop below 30% life, you become your Guardian of the Ancient Kings for 4 seconds. It cannot occur more than every 45 seconds. So again, if you're getting absolutely trucked by a boss, this could be potentially pretty powerful. But again, it's really tough to know what is going to have the most effect. I think it'll be more fight dependent. So we could do something like this where we have additional 10% armor and our Ardent Defender gives us an additional 10% damage. Maybe we want a little bit more strength instead. We don't need the extra 10% damage. We can take our Inspiring Vanguard to make our Grand Crusader give us a little bit more strength. Or we could take these out of these two and we could put more damage in Tyr's Enforcer, allowing us to be able to have an additional absorb from the shield. So there's a few options. Then one of the nice changes so far is that we actually have a few different options. Before, the Pally Tree was a bit more limited in what you could pick, which was kind of a bummer. And that is always a sign of a tree needing a little bit of help, in my opinion, is when you're kind of forced into taking almost the same abilities on every one of your builds. Even though it did change a bit, I still think that they could iterate on more of these and add a little bit more options for us, but it would really just depend on the fight. Oh, I forgot to mention Bastion of Light. I don't know that this is terribly powerful. Your next 3 Shield of Righteous or Word of Glories cost no holy power, which is nice. So for example, you could, have Bastion of Light and maybe Seal of Order. That way it allows you to have your ability. You use your abilities that don't cost holy power, so you can get to your 5 stacks, of holy power, so you can get your Dusk and then of Dawn as well. So that might be something to play around with. I don't know that that's going to be better than the setup we have currently, but it is something to think about. That's what I would do for more of like a single target build. So let's change a few things around for a Mythic Plus build. I think for Mythic Plus, I think we can take the 2 points out of here, and these 2 points are kind of pretty easy. We could always leave these points in here and take them out of somewhere else. For example, we could take them out of here. And I think we obviously want to change this to hitting 2 additional targets. I think that obviously Bulwark of Righteous Fury is incredibly powerful. That is a legendary we use in M+ right now. So this is very, very powerful. I love seeing that back, as we were doing tremendous amounts of damage in M+. It's a super, super strong ability. I like it coming back quite a bit. Also, again, this is additional damage that we can have, especially because it is a 5-yard range for each of the targets hit, which increases the amount of damage from our shield. I think is pretty powerful, leaving us our 1 point. We could take an additional 15% damage to its primary target, but I think that Bubble Taunt in a Mythic Plus scenario is probably more powerful than just a bit extra damage on the primary target hit. Again, if you wanted a bit more strength in your M+, you could take your Inspiring Vanguard. And if you really want to be more of a utility tank in M+, and be able to provide more utility for your group as opposed to more damage or more survivability, you could spec down into the Titans of Light and into the Hand of Protector. That is an option. But I think for now, what we're trying to do, especially in the beginning of the expansion, is just be a more reliable, more damage mitigation tank with our Sentinel. We got some extra absorbs from all of our Avengers Shield procs. And so this is how I would change it for an M+. You could also make the case that maybe the extra armor in M+ is better than the Bubble Taunt, but I think either one of these are a fine choice. But again, this is where we kind of run into the issue where you only change a few points kind of depending on the content that you're doing. Whereas a lot of different trees in the tank sphere of things, you have quite a bit of options. For example, we'll be going over Bear Druid, and in a Bear Druid, you have almost a completely different build or selection of talents for single target versus AoE, which adds variety, which makes it a bit more interesting to play. And it seems with Paladin that you're really not going to change too much. Let's change this to Hammer of the Righteous for M+. So this is what I would do again for M+, but again, there's not a lot of variety. There's not a lot of change. There's a few things that swap around, and it's nice to see that they have a few more points, a few more interconnectivity inside the tree. But for the most part, there really isn't that much that we change for M+. I really don't know if that we really changed too much in here with M+. You could always take this in M+, even though we would be the only Paladin. It still is pretty powerful being able to gain Seraphim if any one of our party members dies. So that is an option for M+. Again, Sack is an option, or if we needed spell warding. But again, I don't know about of Dusk and Dawn still. There's just not a lot of variety when it comes to the Paladin tree. And variety, I think, is the spice of life, as they say. And especially with variety, it allows you to tailor your class to deal with whatever situations it might encounter. With less options, you're just able to encompass less and under your umbrella, and then have more weaknesses just because you have a lack of options, if that makes sense for everybody. So again, I don't think Paladin is bad by any means. I think Paladin is doing what Paladin does now. I don't know that Paladin's getting a ton. I think the only tank that's getting less than Paladin right now, is at least new things come Dragonflight, is Monk. There's really not, Brewmaster specifically, there's really not too many changes or new bells and whistles that we're getting. Like I said, really the only new things that we're getting in Dragonflight is Eye of Tyr and Sentinel, both of which I love and are very, very cool. And I love seeing them come back and trying something new with Sentinel. But there's just not a lot of variety, and I think that it could really use some variety in the tree, and it could make it a bit more powerful. But if you disagree with anything I've said so far, please let me know down in the comments, or if you're trying a different build or you think that I missed out on something, I would love to know in the comments. But for now, I think that's everything with the new Paladin changes. Again, there's not too many changes or too many things that have really been iterated upon or new versions of. Paladin is one of the classes that's got kind of the least amount of updates of all the tanks. I think Bear Druid and Paladin probably have had the least amount of changes of all the tanks, which is again kind of a bummer, but I hope they keep iterating on this. We have a bit of time before the Dragonflight obviously rolls out and before we get pre-patch. So hopefully they'll keep iterating on this and making it a little bit more exciting, but I think that's everything. So why don't we wrap up this video? Alrighty, folks, that's going to do it for this video. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I apologize for the long wait on Paladin, but it was one of the classes I was waiting for them to change before I made another video, so I didn't end up in the situation that I always seem to end up in, where I make a video and release it and then they update it the next day. So I apologize again for letting this take, or having this take a little bit longer time. I hope this video was useful for you guys. Hopefully they'll keep iterating on Paladin and making things a bit more interesting. But until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Again, thank you all for watching. And if you're interested in all things tanking, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment for the algorithm and give it a thumbs up if you found it useful. Thank you all again for watching. I really do appreciate all the love and support. So until the next one, guys, make sure to be safe, be kind, and I will catch you all in the next one.